I was wondering if I should like release an entire like edited video about this, kind of talking about this. Maybe at some point I will, but I do need to like start thinking about like how best I'm gonna handle like the longer form edited content versus like the classic videos that people actually like. Like for me, I'm just struggling like making the transition into making longer form content because like I'm not a video editor. Traditionally, I don't script my videos, so like it's been very difficult for me to like try and like change my habits as a YouTuber. Like, because I genuinely enjoy what I do now, and like when I look at like the website harmansmithbooks.com, when I look at my books, when I look at everything I do, like it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of time learning how to video edit when like I could be like focusing on other things. So like again, I am trying to put out longer content. I am trying to do it, but at the same time, like I want to keep up with like the daily uploads and keep up with what I'm doing and like stay on top of everything and like don't let things slide like I have been for the past couple of weeks. So it's been like it's been very, very interesting to see what's been happening over the past several days. And when it comes to the news and when it comes to like gaming culture, when it comes to like the copes that people are coming up with, not right now. But like right now, I'm kind of stuck in the past. Right now I'm playing like a bunch of older games, a bunch of older RPGs, and kind of like ironing out how I feel about them. So this has been a really difficult thing for me to admit to myself because in a lot of ways, Persona 4 is kind of an interesting, kind of an important title to me because this is actually the first game where I became aware of like the woke, subversive, like cultural, like game journo takes when it came to a video game property. Like this was a game that I had never played before, that I had no history with, that I'd never heard of before, but like it was something that was weaponized among wokies to try and push their weird political agenda, right? And even now that's true. Like you still see people try and say that like NATO is gay, NATO is trans, and that Kanji is gay, and that like I've even seen people say Yukiko and Chie are gay at this point. Like I've seen like it's really interesting to see like how this game like appeals to this certain demographic of people because of some of its themes and ideas, and yet at its absolute core, it is very much antithetical to that. Like what actually happens in the game is completely contrary to the narrative that this is some like pro LGBTQ masterwork. Okay, and it's very, very interesting because back in the day, this really was like a kind of Bayonetta or a modern Fire Emblem situation where people really want to pretend the game is a lot more woke than it actually is in order to push their agenda, right? Like we see this a lot in video games and in culture in general, where like you see a lot of these people like desperately try and pretend that like characters are gay and like to push their social messaging. It's embarrassing and it's pathetic and it's sad. But for me, Persona 4 was the first time that I had ever seen this happen. And it was for a game that I had never heard of before. So in a lot of ways, Persona 4 became kind of a symbol for me of like, anti-woke counterculture and like talking about the game and like, using this as an example. And because it's something that like got a lot of people really fired up. Like, I think in a lot of ways, the anti-woke anime community that we see today specifically came out of Persona 4 and how this situation was entirely warped to push the social agenda. I do think this is an interesting piece of history and should be talked about, and it's a good example of how things can get warped and twisted over time, especially if the developers choose to enable this kind of nonsense going into like Persona 4 Revival, the remake, which I almost certainly will at this point, considering just how prevalent this mindset is. Like, again, this seems to be the tactic they use, is that they introduce all these insane, like, pro-gay agendas, like, and then, like, try and influence people to join the company and, like, push these for these changes behind the scenes. That seems to be what's happening now. And it's something that we do have to push back against and, like, rebel against, obviously. It's what we're seeing now is like they're trying to make these changes, they're trying to normalize this, but the end result is that like nobody really cares all that much, and everybody just kind of intuitively understands that like it's all fake and gay, and it's not really resulting in anything. So like again, that's kind of my history with Persona 4. But I never actually played the game until just recently. And now that I've played the game, I do have to say that it is a steaming pile of shit. Like, now that I've actually played Persona 4, I do feel that it really does, like, fall under, like, PS2 syndrome, where, like, the game is complete slop, but, like, yet because it was on the PS2, a lot of people hyped it up because of that. Like, because there was nothing else to play on that thing, because, like, real gamers were exclusively playing on GameCube and GBA and maybe Xbox. Like, Persona 4 is just another example of a mid title being put on a pedestal because it is a PS2 game. And that's really the only reason why. I think the only reason this IP got any traction at all was because of that period of time where, like, you know, the narrative was that the PS2 was, like, the dominant force in gaming. And you had all these people buying all these weird games for it. And they didn't have the experience to know what was and wasn't good. And as a result of that, they started, like, you know, hyping up all this weird stuff that didn't really do a lot, that wasn't really all that good, that was maybe a couple of hours long. You know, you look at stuff like, you know, Fatal Frame 2 is a good example. Like, it was not that long ago when Fatal Frame 2 was considered one of the greatest horror games of all time, right? And now that I've actually played it, it's complete slop. It has no redeeming qualities at all. Persona 4 is not quite that bad, because at the very least it's kind of stylish. Some of the characters are likable. I kind of like the idea of it, but like at the end of the day, this is an extremely grindy RPG where not a whole lot happens, right? When you look at something like Pokemon, where like you're constantly like catching new Pokemon and evolving and like making progress in the story, like what you get out of something like a Pokemon is that you get a lot more content compared to Persona 4. Because, like, in Persona 4, all you do is you walk along these randomly generated hallways, you keep grinding against basic enemies, and then try to beat the boss. Like, the bulk of the game is, like, in the city, where, like, you go around and, like, talk to people and form social links and have, like, these like, life events and stuff like that. But they're not particularly fun, well-written, or engaging. And honestly, like, I would rather just cut the gameplay out entirely and just make this a visual novel. And I really don't understand why they don't do that, because this has been a reoccurring thing with me. Like, as I play these games, you know, I finished Persona 5, I played this, like, I don't understand why Persona has gameplay, because the gameplay in these games severely holds it back. Like, I feel like it would make a lot more sense if it would go all in on, like, the dating sim aspect and, like, actually flesh out the social elements and make it more about, like, you know, making that more fleshed out and interesting. Instead, what we get is this really by-the-numbers RPG that has, like, this really basic setup, this really stupid, stereotypical anime plot, and just these plot lines that go nowhere. Like, it's frustrating to me to see how, like, you know, they introduce characters like Shie, Yukiko, like Kanji, how they have these characters, they have these, like, problems, they have these, like, pretty, like, interesting, unique character traits and ideas, and yet the game does nothing with them. Like, you know, I was, like, 20 hours in when I stopped, and yet, like, I felt as if the characters did not grow, they did not develop, like, none of their problems were addressed, and yet we just kind of moved on to, like, establishing the next character, right? There was no real attempt at tying in these characters and their problems into the overarching plot. And the narrative has always been like, well, that's what the social links are for. But, like, my answer to that is that, like, the social links are poorly written, they're poorly incorporated into the plot, and they only include the protagonist and the character you're forming the social link with. Like, it doesn't really feel like you have a real, organic, like, genuine friend group. It feels like some weird power fantasy thing. And that's always been my problem with Persona, is that, like, it is a power fantasy for incels, where, like, all the cute girls want to know you and, like, be your friend, and, like, you know, you just have superpowers, and, like, you're, like, a super important guy, and, like, everybody loves you. Like, there's no real... It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like you're dealing with actual, like, teenager problems. It doesn't feel as if like it's genuine. You know what I mean? Like when you look at something like Pokemon, like, you know, Pokemon does a lot to make you nostalgic for, like, you know, older Japan. You know, like, you know, it's very much based on like the creators' like childhood memories of like of Japan and like the culture there, and like, you know, their memories of their childhood. Like it feels a lot more genuine. There is a wish fulfillment aspect to it. Like you'll never be able to go back to that period, but like again, this is like an example of just how that kind of feeling, that kind of nostalgia, that kind of like, you know, wish fulfillment can be a good positive thing, because it really does get across like how much these people love their country, and they're like loved growing up, and love like the relationships they had with other people. We are not seeing that. You don't see that with Persona. Like Persona does not do anywhere near as good of a job making you feel as attached to like Inaba as like Pokemon does for Kanto, right? Persona 4 is just not as well crafted as an RPG as Pokemon or Xenoblade or Fire Emblem, which all excel in like way different things than this. Like you look at like what Persona does, and at its core, like it really is just an extremely simplified RPG for people who don't want to like really commit to like, you know, a proper SMT game. Is just kind of my mindset on it. Like the game just isn't that good, and yet because of like how it became such a big thing in the culture war early on, like a lot of people on both sides were like trying to claim it as their own, and I don't really think we should have done that. Like in a lot of ways, I feel like people should have been a lot more genuine about this and acknowledging that it's not as good as it's cracked up to be, that it's not a very good game, that doesn't match up to even like the below average Nintendo RPGs, right? This is a game that like got a lot of hype and attention because PlayStation 2 owners don't play a lot of games. They don't know a lot about them. They don't know anything about gaming. They don't know anything about RPGs. They don't even know all that much about SMT, Shin Megami Tensei. In a lot of cases. Like, Persona 4 is a really basic game that I feel doesn't really deserve any attention or praise at all. Like, it doesn't do anything interesting. It's not a very good video game. And as a result of that, I have dropped the game. I will not be finishing it. I will not be playing it again. Like, this game is a complete train wreck, and more people need to understand it.